do have a limited battery, so it can only go for about half an hour for the whole
Right, I'll be real quick then.
Okay.
And here we are at my playground, my workshop,
We are indeed.
Dave, and it's nice for you to be here and share some of my my space.
I'm loving your space, Stan.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Dave here, how are you? I am here today with Stan Ceglinski in his playground. This is on the top of a beautiful hill. I'm just surrounded by nature, full on. And I can tell that Stan, when he walked in the door here, the smile on his face said it all. Now I've got some questions for Stan, and I've already shown him so he knows ahead of what's going to be asked. So Stan, I'm going to run through these. I might change them around in the editing, but that's how we're going to do it. So what did your parents do as you were growing up, Stan?
Mum and Dad came to Australia, being freed in Germany. They were Polish.
Yes.
And they were taken into forced work camps into Germany when the war was on. And when they came to Australia, they were that poor that Dad lived in a hollow tree for 6 months. Mum made a straw mattress for him, and the tree wasn't overly big. It was Dad had to sit up sleeping, and Mum made a mattress for him out of calico and straw that they cut on this block of land that they somehow secured. Dad was a cobbler. Mum lost both her parents by the time she was 4 and forced to work on her uncle's farm raising chickens and geese, and as she got older the animals became bigger. At 15, Mum went to Warsaw, and she developed a skill where she could look at a woman's clothing, men's clothing, look at it and make it perfect. And so Mum became a seamstress at age 15 in Warsaw, and then afterwards taken into Germany. When they came to Australia, there wasn't a calling for cobblers, which Dad was.
What year would that have been, Stan?
1948.
1948.
Anyway, there wasn't a calling for cobblers in Australia in 48. Dad got a job at the BHP as a labourer, pushing dust from one end of the BHP to the other in Newcastle. And but nevertheless, from the age 4 years old, I remember Mum teaching me how to plait with 3, plait with 4, sew, crochet. Dad, I used to go in the bush with Dad from when I was 6, and we'd get saplings. He didn't have a car, and across the road there was a railway line, and there was thousands of acres of bush, and he'd cut small sapling trees, and he'd cut a branch off and a bit of trunk, and that was a mallet for me, and I'd bang what I now know was brush box saplings, and I'd hit the bark and skin them off, and Dad had a sugar bag that he'd fold up and put on his shoulder, and by the time I was 6 or 7 or 8, I was pretty strong. I've never been small, and I'd get on the skinny end and we'd take home, and Dad would use that for fixing the fence. And Mum's backyard was like a farm. It was about half, 3/4 of an acre in a place called Whitebridge, and the front of the block had flowers and stuff, and at the back it was like a farm. Mum grew all the fruit trees. She had chooks, rabbits, which she'd slaughter, and eggs and meat and stuff, and all the vegetables. And from a young age I learnt to grow, help her with the gardening.
Yeah. So your parents' influence on you, Stan, would you see that as being something that's dynamic to where you are now?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Really big time.
If you had your life over again, would you have chosen the same path?
Yeah. Would have thrown myself in the current just the same.
Excellent. Now, Stan, what did you complete school? What subjects did you go to school? Was it a formal education, or was it more of a home tutoring?
Primary school was lovely. I was brought up as a Polish farm boy within the confines of our block of land in Whitebridge, and then when I left the yard, I became a chunky little Australian boy, a wog boy.
Yes.
And I went to school. Primary school was fantastic. I loved it with a passion, and I was really good at arithmetic and spelling and all sorts of stuff.
And during those years, did you integrate really easily with the other kids in Australia?
Yeah, I did actually. High school was different. There was a fair lot of pressure on anybody with Italian or Greek name, WOG,
Yes.
WOP, and but I had some friends, and something happened when they started talking trigonometry and some of the technical stuff. I sort of lost the plot, and Mum and Dad couldn't help me. My sisters had grown up and left home, and they couldn't help me. And so I started losing the plot, and by the time I came to fourth form high school, I knew I wasn't going to pass. And so halfway through fourth form, year 10,
Yes.
my brother-in-law was in the Navy, and the stories he told of travelling the world, and there was apprenticeships, and my dream was to become an apprentice, get an apprenticeship. And so I left school halfway through year 10 thinking I'd get an apprenticeship without the formal education, and I passed everything, psychological test, and no, it didn't surprise me, but I passed everything, and right at the end of the testing they do a hearing test on you, and I failed miserably, and that was with the Navy, and I thought, oh, I'll join the Army, and I didn't realise there was killing involved. I didn't see that. I just kept seeing an apprenticeship.
Yes.
And I did all the answers properly, and at the end they did the hearing test and I failed again. And anyway, it's only recently I realised that I had my first proper hearing test when I was 15. That was with the Navy and the Army, but the hearing loss was actually, I reckon, when I was 10.
So going back to actually at school, what subjects did you take? Did you take woodwork and metalwork and things like that?
Woodwork, metalwork, tech drawing. Mate, I killed it. I loved it. I just lived.
Did you do art at all?
Yeah, I think, I did some.
Right.
Not as a dedicated thing, but there was art involved, but it wasn't something I chose.
So I'm guessing in year 7 they gave you a spattering of, when I went through school, it was a spattering of, you do all these and you do your electives in year 8.
Yeah.
And so did you choose woodwork or metalwork or?
Yep. Yeah, woodwork, metalwork, tech drawing,
Yep.
and I always got 99 out of 100, and yeah, I loved it. I lived for it.
And what about the other kids in those forms? This is a period where you were having a little bit of a racial discrimination happening, and if I could call it that, were the other kids envious of how you were doing with woodwork and metalwork?
Maybe. I can't remember any emotional type stuff from those days, but I loved it, and yeah, I loved it.
Okay, so it seems to me you've got a bit of a self-preservation there, blocking out a few things that may not have been all that good.
Yeah, definitely.
I totally get that.
But when I left home at 19 to see Australia, I went to the mines up in far north Queensland, and when I left Newcastle, the shoes I was wearing I made myself. I made an Inkaloom belt, and I made beautiful Inkaloom belts, and I used some leather and sewed with 2 needles like Dad showed me. My shoes I made, my pants I made, my shirt I made, my leather travelling bag I made myself. And I was coming up to the Northern Rivers because I heard you could get land at Tunterville Falls for $260. And even though I worked in the mines in Weipa, in Dampier, East Intercourse Island in Western Australia, even though I made a lot of money, I paid some bills that I accrued when I was in my younger days, and I still didn't have a lot of money, but $260 was affordable for be on the land, because by the time I got to 19, I didn't want to be in a city anymore.
Now, moving forward, so the wood shows, now I know you were a champion of the wood shows, and they're not on anymore really, apart from the ones at Malini up here. Do you miss the wood shows? Because I know you were an inspiration to a lot of people, especially the school kids that came along for a boring school excursion. I witnessed you with your brass loudhailer and having the kids having competitions with logs put into Triton super jaws and soaring away and you egging them on, and the smile on their faces was fantastic. So back to the question, do you miss those shows?
I miss them with a passion. I feel like one of my arms has been ripped off, to be honest.
Right.
You know, I discovered at the wood shows, the first time I ever went to Sydney, I went to see the TDA, Trade Development Authority, New South Wales. a guy called Alan Cardwell, and I started splitting shingles, and I wanted to talk to him and let him know that somebody out there was passionate about splitting shingles and shingle roofs. And when I got to his office, they said he's not here. He's at a wood show at Fox Studios. And I'd come all the way to Sydney. I wasn't smart enough to think about an appointment or anything, and I just lobbed up. And so I thought, oh, here we come this far, I'll go visit him there. And Alan and John Ireland on their display, he had quite a few people around him. When they finished, I said, could I talk to you? And he said, yeah. And anyway, I opened this sports bag and I pulled out red mahogany shingles and grey ironbark shingles that were bona fide 150 years old. There was nails that held them on. And I started to tell him this history of these jobs that I'd done. And he said, mate, you're on the wrong side of the table. He said, I want to introduce you to somebody. So he took me upstairs to the goldfish bowl, it looked like, and introduced me to Patrick O'Reilly. And he said, this guy here, mate, is just a whiz with old-fashioned ways of timber. And Patrick asked me, could I become an Australian larrikin and do the wood shows, you know. A
little bit like Paul Hogan, is that what they were after?
Yeah, in the timber industry, something like that. Anyway, in the beginning, I was quite technical. I was talking about tangential, longitudinal, radial shrinkages, and then one day I was doing a show at John Darien Woolshed, west of Toowoomba. They have a 9-day festival of 100 years ago thing, and this old guy, Reg Bartz, was 86, and people think that country people are dumb, you know, but they're not.
No.
This guy I met restored big steam engines and stuff. And all the people, but anyway, one day Reg Bartz is watching me, and I'd build a beautiful, faithful bark hut using forked saplings and Cobb and Co. hitched 8-gauge wire and slabs of smoke-cured bark, and I was splitting shingles and talking. And when I finished, Reg Bartz comes up to me and says, he said, Stan, there's nothing you don't know. He said, that Asian guy you were talking to, he asked you about shrinkage and you rattled off 0.001 or something for longitudinal shrinkage and radial shrinkage, tangential shrinkage. And then he said after a while, he said, however. Now, Dave, I don't know if you know this, but the word but or however, you're in for a letdown.
I know.
And here was I thinking he was really putting me up, you know, and then he said, but, or however, it was a long time ago and I forgot which word it was. He said, you're too serious. You're going to have to learn to bullshit a bit. You know, the next guy that came along at a demo and asked me a question, he said, how long have you been doing this for? I said, 36 years. And I was 36 years old. Then afterwards, I thought, no, that's not bullshit, that's a lie. And then one day, a year later, I was in somebody's house, and on the wall was their parents in sepia photograph. And in those days they didn't have coloured photographs, it was sepia at the best. Black and white was a bit boring, so they did sepia, but the women's faces had pink on the side of the cheeks. And I thought, that's what this holy grail bullshit is in Australia. It's colouring of a story. Because my mum and dad, when they came to Australia, they were that poor and they worked that hard to survive. There wasn't bullshit. It was survival.
Yes.
There wasn't... Some of the kids I went to school with said, your mum never smiles. I said, she does, but with her eyes. She's had a hard life. Anyway, so after that day when I went to the wood shows, I started making me stories in colour. And... it was fantastic. I had 86-year-old guys, 90-year-old guys. I had women, people from overseas come up to me. One guy said to me, after he did a cross-cut saw race in Brisbane, and he'd listened to the stories as a lead-up to the cross-cut saw race, and I had my traditional post and rail fence around me, and I asked if somebody'd like to have a go on the saw, and this old guy with white hair jumped over me fence, which freaked me out, because on the concrete I had... wood chips, and you could skate and you could hurt yourself. And I said, I got a good gait there. And I said, have you got a partner? He said, no. I said, you want to win or lose? If you want to win, I'll pick a big person for you out of the crowd. He said, I don't care. And another guy out in the crowd said, I'll help him. And he was about over 60. And he jumped over the fence too. And I'm thinking, oh, geez, don't fall over. Anyway, so ready, set, go. And there was a couple of strapping young men from high school on the other side. And these old guys, mate, they had this beautiful old crosscut saw. And away they went with just perfect rhythm. It's what it's all about, rhythm. And mate, these young guys at first thought they were going to kill these old guys, and these old guys left them for dead, and they cut the disc off. And in those days, still used to give me the most beautiful prizes to give away. It was Villeroy and Bosch China from Germany, and the most beautiful stuff. Anyway, I said to these two older guys, I said, mate, you're that good, I'm going to put you straight in the grand final Sunday. And both of them said, look, we're sorry, we can't do it. One came from down near Kempsey, the other one was a long way away up in Queensland. And I gave them this beautiful prize each, and the old guy comes up to me and said, could I shake your hand, Stan? I said, yeah, no problem. And while we're shaking hands, he looks me in the eye and he said, could you do me a favour? And favour, my dad somehow instilled in me that if you say, yes, I'll do you a favour, or if you shake on it, it's a contractual arrangement. And he didn't tell me what the favour was, and I thought about it for a microsecond or two. And I said, yeah, I'll do you a favour. He said, shake on it. So back into a shaking hands thing. He said, don't ever stop what you're doing. And I said, oh, mate, I thought you were going to ask me something hard.
Yep.
And I said, I don't want to ever stop doing this.
No.
You know, the joy that working with the kids especially, actually, Dave, on the Friday, people used to say, oh, it's school day, we're going to have all these kids and, it's a nightmare and they give you cheek and stuff like that. But I discovered real quick, if I laid down some ground rules and was a bit firm on them, it was terrific.
I've witnessed you do it many times, Stan.
Right,
Many
I loved
times.
it.
Fridays were a bit of a, just sit around and not do much for the stalls.
Yep.
Because we'd have the customers coming in on the Saturdays mostly, and then on the Sunday a little bit towards lunchtime. But Fridays were a bit of a dead day for us. But for you, they would have been the pinnacle.
Oh, it was the best. Some of the kids, Dave, keep in touch with me. One guy, I just finished making a beautiful guitar called a Telecaster. I took it to the wood show, and this young guy, he's looking at it, he's staring, he's just admiring it. I said, would you like to hold it? He said, oh, could I? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So I got it down and gave it to him. I said, would you like me to plug it in? Because I had an amp. He said, oh, yes, please. And so I plugged it in. I said, what key are you playing in? And he told me, and I had a harmonica, so he's playing guitar and bluesy sort of tune. I joined him on harp. He went away and bought some timber from my shop, and then he rang me up and said, I'd like to come and visit you and bring me mum and dad, and he bought some more timber. And this time he made a project that was really up there, like he wanted to make the hardest guitar on the planet, an archtop guitar. And it was all about the inspiration he got from seeing something that I'd made. And because I had cigar box guitars and guitars made out of biscuit tins and stuff like that. And but I know for a fact that telling stories to the kids of the olden days, how it was, showing them how things could be done without power and such, there was quite a lot of those people took it in. And this one particular young guy, and he follows me on Facebook and I follow him and stuff, but it was special days, Dave.
Yes.
Special.
That leads me on to the next question, Stan. We do have to kind of push it along a little bit. I'm going to run out of battery soon. It's obvious to me that you love to inspire the younger generations. Do your own grandchildren appreciate the love and nurturing you shower them with?
Yeah, they're learning. One day, one of my boys, Pete, he brought his two little sons up and he said, Dad, there's a place not far from where we live, and if you pay $70 a kid, you can make like a little Viking axe. And but if you just want to watch it being made, it's $30. But if you want to take it home, it's $70. And he's got 2 kids, that's $140. He said, Dad, could you show the kids how to make a sword and an axe? And I said, yeah, sure. So they went off into the bush over there, and they came back with some pretty curly looking gum sticks. And with the bandsaw, I cut a slot out, and we made some axe heads look like a Viking axe, and I offset the hole and put a dowel in there, 1/2 mil offset, so it'd lock it in nice and firm, and made him a sword. The kids have still got them. And young Finn, who's 10 now, I had him on a crosscut saw with me when he was about 6, and he loved it. The kids I'm showing the kids everything. It's something tangible, something they can understand and feel. A razor sharp draw knife, you know, it's a joy. And I made them little breast bibs of shingle with a rope in it, so if you don't slip. There's something where your muscles just stop if you. But anyway, the kids love it, and I love it with the kids.
Excellent. When did your passion for woodwork actually start, Stan? We may have covered this a little bit earlier, but I'm just wondering if there's any particular...
46 years ago.
46 years, so you're only 46 years old, is that what you're saying?
No. I was into wood from when I was 6 with Dad, but when I was 19, I went to Weeper, 20, 21. 21, I said to Nolene, who was my girlfriend at the time, I said, look, I love you heaps, honey. She was a nurse in Sydney, she went from Newcastle to Sydney. I said, look, I love you heaps, but I can't live in the city. I'm going to go look for some land. And she said, you go look, and when you find it, I've got holidays coming up, I'll come. So anyway, with the shoes and everything I made, I started hitchhiking. And this old green truck pulled in front of me and went down this bush track. And 15 minutes later it came back. And in those 15 minutes I walked to the other side of the lane, and when it came out I put my thumb out, and this guy picked me up. It was an old green Dodge 2-tonner, and on the back he had some marble. And it was Ian Mackay. He did John Cornell's house, he did the Beach Hotel, he did Paul Hogan's house. He was a very famous architect, and he'd gone to Sydney to get this marble for his own house. Anyway, on the way up he said, what are you doing? And I said, I heard there's land at Tunderville Falls, and by the time we got to Casino Way, he said, I don't really, he saw me as somebody more down to earth than, Tunderville Falls had a reputation for mushrooms and marijuana and just drugging out, where I was into more earthy stuff. I used to read Earth Garden magazine and growing stuff, making stuff myself. Anyway, at Casino, a truck went the other way and threw up a rock and smashed his windscreen. And in my travelling bag, I had a Beltman's knife from the mines, and he went to brush away the fractured glass like diamonds, and he cut himself straight away. I said, Ian, stop. I went across the road and cut some millet straw, and in a couple of seconds I'd fashioned just a little broom for him. And I said, use that. And by the time we got to Mullumbim, he said, listen, he said, I got a property at Montecolum. He said, I got an old tent there, I'll loan you that, and you can go to Tunderville Falls and have a look at the land. Anyway, when I ended up coming back, I said, yeah, I know what you mean. Nolene actually came up and we went together, and we went there, and she didn't like it. But anyway, Ian said, I'll give you an apprenticeship. Now, this guy was passionate. He was an architect builder.
Yes. But
he had passion. He knew how the Japanese, when they built temples, they orientated the poles from trees they cut in the forest. They orientated north in the temple, so the temple would be at ease with itself. Because the north side of the tree in the southern hemisphere grows more sapwood than the southern side. And in the northern hemisphere, it's back way around.
Towards the equator.
And if you put timber, if you cut a beam out of a tree and you have the heart of the tree facing the environment, it opens up and does bad stuff. But when you orientate timber the way it was made in nature, back towards nature, you're just way in front. And
Can I ask a question there?
Yeah.
Is it when you do a cross cut on the tree, you would see the thicker sapwood on one side, and that's the
absolutely.
north. That's the north.
Yep. And
And
sometimes
you'd mark the end grain, and say when we're milling it, that's the way it's got to go.
And sometimes the heart isn't in the centre, it's right off the centre, and you've got way more growth on the northern side. And so he understood the orientation of timber in from nature through to construction and stuff. And over the years when I was working with him, mate, I couldn't believe the beautiful stuff I was learning.
Yes. Well, that's the next question. Did you do an apprenticeship? And if so, who with? It was obviously this gentleman here.
Yeah.
Even without a school certificate. He said, I'll take you on. So how did you go with the authorities? Did you get an apprenticeship, or was it one that was a hands-on experience and that was it?
Yeah, it was informal. But one day, I've mentioned shingles before. My understanding is Nolan and I are the last hardwood shingle manufacturer in the country. Today, we're the only hardwood manufacturer. Anyway, I thought it'd be a good idea to get a ticket or some sort of recognition. And so I contacted, I can't remember the authority, but one day I'm in the Mullumbimby barber shop, I'm getting a haircut, and the phone rang, and it was the people who you do the questions with for a ticket. Anyway, I said to Greg the barber, I said, I've got to take this call. I think I had an old brick phone or something. Anyway, so in the barber shop, I did my examination for a shingle installer.
While you're in the chair?
Yeah, and as well as that, he said, you want a supervisor's ticket while you're at it? And I said, oh yeah. And he asked me some more, and I got a proper ticket, you know.
Excellent. Did you formally learn any other trades?
No. But I learnt to blacksmith, and I blacksmith my own tools. I learnt to weld. When I didn't get the apprenticeship with the Navy, whatever, I got a job erecting silos in the New South Wales Hunter Valley, and I also got a job building Cessnock Prison. My tradesman I was working with, I was a tradesman's mate, an assistant. He was a boilermaker, and he was a bikie, and he loved grog. Loved beer with a passion, and every day he'd jump on his trumpy motorbike and ride off to Cessnock Hotel, and the minute the dust stopped, I'd grab his welder, and they were big welders, they'd run 4mm rods. As soon as he'd be gone, I'd pick up his welder, and I was learning to weld with a stick welder. I got that good with an oxyacetylene welder, I could weld 2 bits of sheet metal together without a rod. I could gouge. I taught myself to weld, oxy cut. I learnt stuff, heaps and heaps of stuff. And when we first come up here 46 years ago, I used to fix people's tractors, their generators. I used to cut rust out of cars, and I'd build fences and bridges and barns, and some of it was genetic DNA, which I honestly believe in. Stuff that's in your makeup.
Carried over from both of your parents, it sounds like to me, not just one.
No, from both parents. And I discovered that I could do practically anything, and if I didn't know something, I'd find out. One day I had problems with a neighbour, and they didn't like the chainsaw noise, so I rang up a professor of sound in South Australia, and I said to the guy, because I rang up muffler people, and they said, no, you buy a muffler. I said, but I want to build one. And nobody knew. And somebody said there's a professor of sound in Adelaide. So I got onto the phone to this guy, and I said, listen, my name's Stan Ceglinski. I've got a problem with a neighbour. I want to make a muffler real quiet. He said, you're the first person in 40 years to ask that question. He said, you got some time? And I said, yep. He said, get a pad and pencil. And he told me the formula, how to break sound. A week and a half later, I built a muffler for an 090 chainsaw, which is the biggest in the world, no anti-vibration and noisy as all hell. And I designed a muffler. And it took me over a week to make it. Everything I had to hand cut with hacksaws and oxy weld and stuff like that. And it was so efficient you could hardly hear it. But when you put into a log, it was gutless. So performance is related to the muffler.
But not everything performance has got to sound like that.
No, I know that. But anyway, so another time I saw a documentary on the ABC about microwave drying timber. And I got this fantastic idea. I'll get a shipping container and I'll get a dozen or so 20 microwave ovens, take all the doors off, put a little bit of wood in there to pretend the doors are on, and put the timber in there and turn it on. And I rang up a professor of, like a NASA professor, and I said, "G'day mate, my name's Stan Ceglinski. I saw this doco about microwave drying timber and it's revolutionary. I want to build one." He said, "How would you do it?" And I told him the shipping container and the microwave ovens and connect them all up and shut the door. He said, "Stan, could you do me a favour?" And I said, "Yeah, no problem." He said, "Don't." He said, "If there's a pinprick in the side of the shipping container, a little tiny hole," he said, "you might, your neighbour will be sitting there watching TV, then all of a sudden he'll be fried." He said, "Don't do it." So anything in life that I didn't understand, including building bridges and barns and big span bridges, I'd just ring up the high school in Mullen and say, "Could I speak to the head of the maths department?" I said, "Can you give me this formula, please?" Or I'd ring up an engineer and say, "Look, I've got a 15 metre one span bridge I've got to build for a guy. What sort of criteria is there involved?" And the engineers I spoke to were really happy to help, actually.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just learned as I went.
So you've learnt, and now do you pass those skills on? Do you teach your skills to others? And if you do, age and range of students, male, female, what?
Everybody.
Everybody.
One of the most important things, I got offered by TAFE to teach small motor maintenance, and I got asked to teach how to build barns and stuff like that with the Aborigines. And when at first I was offered the job by TAFE at Wollongbar near Lismore, I thought, geez, I'm not a teacher, you know. Anyway, so I went out to Mully Mully Mission. Actually, no, the first job was small motor maintenance. So I said to this group of, it was for women, what happens when your car won't start? And I said to the women, go to the dump, find a lawnmower that does not work. Get one, whatever, but do not bring a mower that works. And so they all came in with stories, and one lady said, the mower guy, he said, "Look, I'll sell you one for 20 bucks that works." She said, "No, I want one that doesn't work."
Yep.
And they all brought a mower in, and we pulled the fuel, because there's three things, there's ignition, air and fuel. And one of those things missing, it don't work. And it's the same with the car, apart from EVs, electric vehicles. So we pulled it right down to pulling the crankcase apart, and we used a small ball peen hammer and a wax milk carton, and I showed them how to make a gasket the old-fashioned way, and we, if it needed bearings, we put bearings in, and all the women, one by one, when they put them all together and put fuel in, cleaned the spark plug, went outside, and wrap around some of the old Victors, and the other ones were spring return ones, or some were to wind up and head it down, she'd start. One by one, them women were walking up and down mowing with the biggest smile on their face.
That's the reward in itself, isn't it?
And what taught me about being a teacher was the Aborigines. The Aborigine people I was teaching out at Mully Mully how to build a big barn. We built a big barn. A friend of mine was teaching them how to grow beans and peas, and they needed a barn to store the goods in. Anyway, I discovered, even though they were 30s, 40s, late 20s, in a way, don't get me wrong, but they were sort of like little children with their understanding of stuff, you know. So if I was going to talk about a distributor and 7 degrees before top dead centre for firing or whatever, I couldn't say it like that. I just had to say that when that thing goes around, it makes electricity jump from here to there. And anyway, I learnt that teaching is all about getting information out of my head into the student's head, and if they're really young or whatever, make it real simple. But teaching is actually understanding the person that you want to instill the information to, and say it in a way or draw a picture that they can understand it. And after that it became easy.
I totally get where you're coming from. My own way of doing it is not to presume any previous knowledge
Yeah,
that the person I'm talking to.
Yep.
So I will teach a carpenter how to pick a hammer up. Doesn't worry me.
Yep.
I take it back to basics. I find out where that person's at, then I can go from there.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Next question. Have you set up wood sheds for others to enjoy, Stan?
Absolutely. Yeah. The last woodshed was a chap 65 years old who was academic, really up there in the academic world and stuff. And at 65, he said, "I want to do woodwork more serious." And he had this rubbish table saw and stuff, and where he had his tools, it was just a little garden shed with junk everywhere. And I said, "You need a proper workshop." Anyway, the chap that owns this 150 acres told me neighbour down the hill, he said, "Stan knows how to build bridges and barns, specialise in post and beam. He'll build you one." Anyway, this guy who became a mate, he used to come up here with timber and I'd put it through the jointer, but I'd show him why it's this way and not that way, or upside down with grain orientation, runoff, whatever. And after about 6 months, I think he started to understand who I was and what I was. And he said to me one day, he said, "I need a workshop." I said, "Oh, beauty, I love that." He said, "But if my wife doesn't like it, you ain't building it." And I said, "No problem." And so I'd done one similar, using 250 by 250 hardwood posts, 250 by 100 beams, with a 6 metre unsupported length, and roof with quite a steep pitch, and so you could have a mezzanine floor. I sent him a couple of photos, and 15 seconds later he said, "Go ahead." And that was one of the most beautifulest jobs I was ever commissioned, because with that, when I was designing it, I considered the cathedral ceilings, the lining colour, the rafters, what they were going to be made from. There was colours involved, there was strength, there was durability, there was orientation. I planned the electrical circuit, the dust extraction circuit. I thought of everything, and I was so lucky. I had a local company not far from where I live with passionate chippies, and because I'd done some damage to my shoulders, and I wasn't capable of doing all the erections, so I pre-cut it all in my son Andrew's sawmill, used his bandsaw to make perfect mortise and tenons into 250 by 250 posts, stopping right on the mark, and it was the whole thing was done, off site and put together. And the dogman from Byron Cranes, when we did one of the buildings, every bolt just went through, everything just got tapped down with a wooden maul and no swearing. And he said, "Mate, I can't believe this." But this particular workshop, I even found him Wadkin and really high quality machines to fill it up with, because he had no idea. And it was a joy.
Excellent, excellent.
Joy.
Now, you're talking about Wadkin. I know that you like your heavy duty machines, and you've had some interesting experiences transporting them as well, Stan, which we won't go into. But you have them here now. In this is one of the current workshop that you've got. Your son has got the sawmill at Bambimbi. You're up on the top of this beautiful mountain hill, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And you have all of these machines here where we're doing this interview. Is there anything that these machines wouldn't be capable of?
Yeah, connecting to a computer.
Okay.
There's no USB ports.
Right. Okay.
The funny thing, Dave,
Yes.
is a guy walked into my workshop after I'd been looking for certain machines for all my working career.
Yes.
I was told what was the best in the world, and I'd search for them. And one day when I had all these machines set up in Billy Nudgel, where I used to be, a guy came in one day and he was talking to me, and he thought that I went into a shop one day and just bought a 38.5-inch Wolfenden bandsaw. The same shop had the 36-inch Barker resaw bandsaw, the Wadkin 26-inch over under planer, Otto Martin tape. He thought I just went in the shop and bought it. I said, "Man, this has taken me 40 years to find these machines."
How old would they be, Stan, those machines that you've got in the workshop? The Wadkin 26-inch wide was 26-inch wide. jointer for a start. That is a massive machine with straight blades.
Yeah, on a Sheelix. They're not straight across, but it is straight blades, and they go on an angle. 60, 70 years old.
Yep.
80, I'm not sure.
Yep.
I'd never even bothered to try and think how old they are, but they're round cutter heads, not square. The square ones were apparently very dangerous, and I was told what to look for. But yeah, they're all made, they were made in a day where companies' reputations rested on that one machine. If they made a dud, word had spread.
Bad news travels 10 times faster than good news.
Maybe more than 10 times.
Could well be. How did you get involved with social media, Stan? You told me a story earlier about having a chat with a news broadcast station, or you were being interviewed with someone. Can you refresh my memory?
One day we got a computer. The kids were talking about going to school. They wanted a computer, and we got this great big monitor, real deep thing, and floppy disk. And anyway, I discovered on the computer one day. My mum used to say in Polish, "Ty jesteś jak smok." That means you drink water like Smok, and Smok was a dragon. Anyway, so I googled, and if anybody's interested, I got Smok on my arm here somewhere.
Yeah.
And this dragon called Smok in Poland, and there's a cave. There's a cave in Poland called Smok's Cave.
I'll move this out of the way so people might be able to see it. Don't flex your biceps up too much, Stan.
Nah. Anyway, when I finished Googling the fable called Smok the Dragon, and it's a great story too, Google Smok the Dragon. SMAUK or something, anyway, it doesn't matter. And then I googled something else. Somehow accidentally I ended up in a museum in Poland with Mum's house built exactly like Mum told me. It wasn't Mum's house, but It was exactly like she told me. Earth floor, root cellar, outside wall made of horizontal pine poles of some sort, or softwood, conifer. The inside wall was only 3/4, and in the autumn when the trees dropped their leaves, the people used to gather up all the leaves and put it between the two walls for insulation. And something else that really spun me out was when I looked at that house in Poland, all the furniture that I thought were my own designs were in this house. And I didn't see any magazines, there was no videos, there was no... Every one of my very own personal design creations was in this house. And then about a year later I saw a doco on TV about genetic memory. And I thought, man, that's what's possibly it, you know? Because I'd never seen stuff like that in my life, you know? But yeah, it was that computer.
And then from there on, you did some of your own videoing as well?
Yeah. I can't remember the cameras we had to begin with, but Johnny Cash's son come to visit, and somebody took a video of that. That was a fantastic thing. But yeah, no, we somehow I learnt that the world of YouTube and the internet is way greater than the people in Mullumbimby or the Sydney Wood Show.
Definitely.
And so I think at the moment I've got about 80 videos up there, but I got kids on there making 3-legged stools, and I got John Carter Cash talking and his wife, and it's the internet is opened up the world.
Now, changing the subject slightly, Stan, you and Nolene are keen gardeners, I believe.
Love it.
How long has this been going on?
Since I was 6.
And Nolene, has she picked up on your passion, or did she have this herself?
She picked up on mine. Her mum grew a few flowers, and Nolene decided she loved growing flowers and flowering shrubs, so she grows flowers and stuff like that and loves it. And the people walking past our place all the time stop, and if she's in the front, they all comment what a beautiful garden she's got. But since young, like I said, Mum and Dad were so poor when they came to Australia. I was into veggies, and now my food kilometres, that's a new term, food kilometres.
Right.
My food kilometres is .002, 20 metres, which is just over there. And
I saw the raised beds.
raised
passion
beds,
fruits there at the moment, and some
Panama red
chili
passion
and some
fruits,
capsicum.
eggplants, kale, collard greens, Russian shallots, chives, green beans, purple beans are now flowering. I'd put in 30 or 40 leeks.
And a special lemon tree, I see.
A special lemon tree, which deserves the world's fastest Indian technique of doing a wee on the tree every day for the potassium. And
I see you got the sawdust around it from the workshop as a thick mulch.
Yeah, and occasionally I burn off pellet material because it's got nails in it. And I'll burn off pellet material and sometimes offcuts specifically for the charcoal and the ashes.
Yes.
Which is also really good for the whole garden, in fact.
Excellent. So it's for the potassium, I guess.
Potassium, and also the ashes are good for tomatoes, and there's some bugs that don't like ash, and it's organic.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of organic matter goes into my garden. I got the trellises out of security fencing, $3 a panel. Beautiful.
We'll move on because, as I say, we're running out of time.
Battery power.
Moving on to the next one. You're involved in music, including your band of musos, Hubcap Stan. How did that come
And the
about?
Sidewalk Stompers.
Well, I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, no,
I just see up there Hubcap
Stan
Stan and the Sidewalk Stompers. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful.
How did that come about?
When I was 19, to keep myself company in the mines around Australia, I bought a guitar, and I was lucky in some of the mining camps. There was travellers who, one played with Stephen Stills, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and he showed me this thing called finger picking. And anyway, one day I discovered I would go busking on the street in Brunswick.
Yep.
And a friend of mine, Slim Pickens, had an upright double bass, and a mate of mine, Donnie McCormack, who used to play with Jefferson John a million years ago, we went busking, and it was on the footpath in Bruns. And then we did busking in Mullum on the footpath, and everywhere we went, people had changed from walking to almost like dancing. And
I'm guessing this is not as though we're running away from you.
no, one day I had this crazy idea to make a guitar using an old vintage hubcap.
Yes.
This is a 1976 911 Porsche hubcap, and I've made them out of Ford and Holden. And anyway, one day I took one of my guitars to Billy Nudgel pub, and a lady who used to run a Sunday afternoon open mic session, she called me Hubcap Stan because of this very old F100 Ford hubcap that I made into a 4-string guitar. And so she called me Hubcap Stan. And one day, when some of these boys at the pub were playing with me or on the street, I thought, Hubcap Stan and the Sidewalk Stompers, because Hubcap Stan and the Footpath boys didn't sound right, but
no.
Somehow the Sidewalk Stompers came into it. And a chap, I've always had some wonderful musicians to play with, and one day Rod Coe, who just made Musician of the Year at Tamworth, he played with Slim Dusty 28 years, he was an EMI record producer for around the same time. He asked could he play double bass for me, and I said sure. And anyway, about 6 months later, he rang me up and he said, listen, this is guy Warren Earl, and I knew who Warren Earl is. He's a Texas swing virtuoso. From 6 years old, he's only like 45 maybe, but from 6 he was studying, not practicing guitar, but studying. And he does these augmented and diminished chords and this stuff. And Texas swing is a wonderful, wonderful genre. Anyway, he said, Warren doesn't know how to ask you this, but he wants to join the band. And I said, it's funny you say that. I said, about a month ago, I was thinking of asking him would he like to sit in. And so I've got a wonderful drummer who played with some of the most famous rock bands, and Warren Earl and Rod Coe, and we've just been invited to do 3 shows at Blues on Broadbeach. But everywhere we go, mate, a lady came and saw us at the Eltham pub, and
Stan, I'm on 1 bar left here, which is
1 bar.
5 minutes.
Next question.
5 minutes. Okay.
We're good. People say we're very good.
Okay, excellent, excellent. I noticed you had a health scare a few years back. Has it affected how you go about things now?
It has. These days, if there's something very heavy, I'm not scared to say to a young person, hey, listen, mate, can you give me a hand? Because even to hang the clothes on the clothesline, I've got to get a run off with my left arm to get it up high. And
yes,
yeah, I've had a couple of little health hiccups, but it's all plateaued, and I feel great. Every day I eat fresh greens, and I'm not scared anymore to put off a heavy job until there's somebody around that can help me physically.
Finally, I know you have a sawmill that your son runs.
Yep.
Are they profitable these days? Or are Formica, plastic, steel and fake veneers destroying the market?
No, there's a place in the world for real products. And Andrew has cut camphor, he's cut lining boards, he's cut floorboards, he's cut hardwood and big post beams. Andrew's specialty now is cutting big posts, big beams up to about 9 metres long, up to 500 square or 300 by 300. It's like anything. Over the years at the wood shows, there was patterns of products that people were buying, and it's a matter of understanding in the timber industry what Joe Blow wants, box making timbers for example, or an architect wanting big beams, whatever. But Andrew, since very, very young, starting in the bush with me, has come to understand market trends and cutting, the very best product he can out of a log. And in hardwoods, it's Royal Species Class 1, red ironbark, grey mountain gum, whatever. And he cuts beautiful, beautiful timbers. And he's got clients that will wait and pay. But if you want to try and make Formica or Laminex in a little factory in Mullumbimby, forget it. Yeah. There's big boys out there. You can't compete with pine studs and frames. You can't compete with big manufacturers that can. You have to look at a special part of the market which you can put passion in, you can put the energy and produce a beautiful product that somebody will pay for.
Excellent. Tell me a bit about how Nolene supports you with your enterprises and how you also support her. I know there's a passionate bond there.
We've been together over 50 years, and early in the piece she discovered I wasn't just any normal Joe Blow. When I used to go away logging, she raised the 3 kids and a farm, and I made a guillotine that she could split shingles and other guys do all the menial work.
In her spare time?
In her spare time. We had 360 organic fruit trees. She used to look after them and the boys and such. But Nolene's an exceptional woman. She'd go to the trade shows with me early in the piece, and she felt comfortable talking to the biggest architects. She could talk timber. And yet she was a very loving and giving mother who was fair with the children, and now she's got 5 grandchildren who she adores. They adore her even more. It's wonderful, and she believes in me, I believe in her. She's unfortunately in life had some issues medically from medical misadventures, not her choosing, and I love her dearly, and so my life has changed to look after her, and she in turn keeps a beautiful home for me that I can come home to, and she's a wonderful wife and wonderful mother, wonderful grandmother. And if the phone rings and somebody wants to talk, and she's got the strength. One day a chap in Sydney rang up and wanted a shingle roof, but he wanted a tin roof as well. And Nolene said, make up your mind, what do you want? And this guy,
Good
Bob
on.
Ellis in Sydney, who was a really big-time builder, could not believe Nolene's honesty. And he told me a few times he invited me, him and his doctor mate, build a big boat, like a 9-ton boat. And they called it boat therapy. And he said he'll never forget speaking to Nolene on the phone years ago with an old dial phone, you know. He said, your wife, mate, is special.
Excellent. Well, Stan, I think that's about it. Thank you so much for spending all of this time with me today, and I am envious of your lifestyle. but it's a little bit warm and humid up this way for me. I think I'll be going back to the mountains.
Right, it does get warm and humid up here.
Do you have any way of keeping the place cool at all up here?
Yeah, I take my shirt off. I got a
We'll keep it on at the moment.
Chromac apron, so me work clobber in the summertime is a pair of shorts, a nice pair of sandals, no shirt, apron, they can put me pens, me thing in it, plus I got a big fan and
Excellent.
I can point it where I'm working.
Excellent. Thanks again, Stan.
Pleasure.
Okay, that's fantastic.